I want to start out by setting the stage for life in the 1970s. In other words, before there was a wine industry in Oregon. This is when Bill Blosser and I, two liberal arts graduates with no financial or agricultural training, decided to buy a piece of property, clear the land, and start an agricultural business. We wanted to plant a grape, Pinot Noir, that had never done well in the United States, and to do it in Oregon, which had no European wine grape industry. The fact that we're still here, that Oregon Pinot Noir is a demand item in the best restaurants internationally, and that the current wine industry pumps something like $5 billion annually into the Oregon economy is something of a miracle and should give all budding entrepreneurs hope. The wine industry in Oregon has evolved from a handful of wineries who all fit into each other's living rooms in a decor we used to describe as contemporary St. Vincent de Paul, into now close to 750 wineries. Today, we have to rent the convention center if we want to get together. But the growth and future of Oregon wine is a subject for another day. Let's go back to the 1970s. It may be hard to remember a time that there was once a time before cell phones, laptops, lattes, and a demand for organic, certified organic fruits and vegetables. Yes, the public wanted clean air, clean water, clean crops, healthy foods, abundant salmon, prime roast beef, beautiful coral reefs, and new pickups and cars every few years. But we had minimal understanding of how interconnected all of these things were. The intersection of Sokol Blosser Winery and the environment is an example of how the idea of what it means to tread gently on the earth has evolved. Sustainability, a word that became the cornerstone of my presidency at Sokol Blosser, was not even in my lexicon when we started our vineyard. This is not to say I didn't consider myself environmentally aware. Bill Blosser and I were friends of the earth. Bill was a lifetime member of the Sierra Club when I married him. At the time, it meant saving the redwoods. I guess you could say we were tree huggers. What I want to share with you today is how my understanding of the environment has evolved and deepened over the years, and I will, by the end, tell you the definition of sustainability I like most. When we started our vineyard, we farmed like the other grape growers and local farmers, using chemicals to combat pests and disease and synthetic fertilizer to make the vines grow. This was the norm. We learned from the farmer from whom we bought our land. He and his wife became friends and mentors. He was a good man, and I still miss him. I managed the vineyards and orchards during the 1980s, and we tried to use chemicals sparingly because we were environmentalists. But I accepted that they were necessary. When I sprayed diazinon or malathion to get rid of cherry fruit fly, I was thinking only about saving our crop. Chemicals were an immediate fix for a pressing problem. Our farmer friend hated that his chemical arsenal had been compromised when arsenic sprays and DDT were banned in the 1950s. "Haven't had a good crop of peaches since," he lamented. He considered himself a good farmer and believed he was taking care of his land. Using chemicals to keep crops clean, the reasoning went, was part of being a steward of the earth. Conventional farming assumed that soil was simply a growing medium. Farmers didn't care that the chemicals killed more than just the targeted pests. In fact, it was common practice to deliberately kill all soil life by fumigating the soil before planting. It was okay if the chemicals killed life in the soil, what we now have realized is the soil food web, making it unable to nourish plants because there were chemicals to provide nutrition externally, like synthetic fertilizer. Nourishing from the outside of the organism is like feeding intravenously instead of through the digestive system. The underlying assumption was that the farmer's job was to tame, or at least control, nature. In this battle, nature will always win. It's just a matter of time. Chemicals that worked well when they were introduced proved to be temporary fixes as the pest they aimed to control developed resistance. As smart as we humans think we are, the, quote, lesser forms of life, weeds and insects, outsmart us every time. We have, however, in our quest to tame nature, succeeded in destroying groundwater, stream and river quality, and endangered the health of many species, including ourselves, by saturating the ground and air with chemicals that have penetrated every part of the food chain. It took years, but I learned it was possible to work with nature instead of trying to tame it. Working with nature means building up the soil, for example, so it can provide nutrition naturally instead of chemically, the equivalent of taking a patient off life support. Working with nature means encouraging a diverse array of species to establish an ecosystem and balance. Farming this way puts farmers and environmentalists on the same side. I took over as president of the winery in 1991, and it was during the 1990s that the concept of sustainability, although not yet either mainstream or well-defined, was starting to appear in the public consciousness. Bill, who, after I became president, went back to work at CH2M in Portland, helped start and then headed their new sustainability practice. He talked to me about how the company was trying to make itself more sustainable and also develop a sustainability specialty they could sell to other businesses. I heard the word a lot, but didn't really understand what it meant. I got a gentle nudge in 1996 when Dan Kent, then with the Pacific Rivers Council, approached me about their new project called Salmon Safe. Based on the old Dolphin Safe tuna marketing, this project assumed that if people knew that a product would not hurt salmon, they would be more likely to buy it. He was working to line up companies for the program. I asked why he came to me instead of going to the dairies down on the flat whose runoff polluted local streams. He said they were working with dairies, but wanted to get the project going, and they knew they could certify Sokol Blosser right away. It turned out that our cover crop experiments, which I had instituted to keep our soil in place during the rainy season, helped salmon by keeping hillside runoff from clogging local streams and rivers. I hadn't considered that by trying to maintain my hillside soil, I was also helping salmon, and the news reminded me how tied together everything was. This was the start of a deepening understanding of Barry Commoner's first law of ecology, that everything is connected to everything else. John Muir actually said it even better in 1911, and he said, "When we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe." It wasn't until 1999, though, that I had my aha moment. It happened when I went to a workshop at Nike on the natural step. How many of you have heard of or know the natural step? A few. Well, actually, that's good, because I'm going to explain it to you. The name sounds like an orthopedic shoe, but it was an attempt by a group of international scientists, masterminded by a Swedish doctor, to formulate a prescription of what it meant to be sustainable. The result was a sobering description of what we would need to do to get off our profoundly unsustainable path of human activity. I learned their 4 system conditions, which brought together different aspects and made a holistic picture of what true sustainability would look like. Here they are. 1, in a sustainable society, nature is not subject to systematically increasing concentrations of substances extracted from the Earth's crust. You can see that there were scientists putting this together. I'm going to repeat that. In a sustainable society, nature is not subject to systematically increasing concentrations of substances extracted from the Earth's crust. So think about all the natural substances we currently extract from the Earth: coal, iron ore, tin, uranium, oil, natural gas, bauxite, gold, silver, platinum, diamonds, just to name a few. 2, in a sustainable society, nature is not subject to a concentration of substances produced by society. In other words, when we take a natural resource, which is biodegradable, and change its molecular structure, we generate new problems. I think of the oil-based plastics, which don't decompose, or high fructose corn syrup, which our bodies cannot properly process. 3, in a sustainable society, nature is not degraded by human physical activity, like filling wetlands, creating air or water pollution, genetic modification, or using raw materials faster than nature can replace them, such as overfishing in the oceans. 4, and this is a social justice one, in a sustainable society, people are not subject to conditions that systematically undermine their capacity to meet their needs. We need to create and support action and policies that allow people to meet their fundamental human needs. Understanding the scope of this comprehensive definition of sustainability had the effect of throwing me into depression. Almost everything I did in my life and my business was unsustainable. I thought of all the extracted materials used in everyday life, all the metal products, the plastic, the fossil fuels used in cars, trucks, airplanes, all in the name of creating jobs and keeping the economy growing. The list went on and on. Yet, all along, I had considered myself environmentally sensitive. I was both depressed and embarrassed. Did I want to follow the natural step and try to meet the system conditions as much as I could? The problem was that once I understood how much I had contributed to our unsustainable condition, I couldn't go back. It reminded me of the old Pogo cartoon, "We have met the enemy, and he is us." I knew I had to face the situation. My lifestyle and business had contributed to what I now saw as a global crisis. Could I do even a small part to change it? So, my new goal became sustainability across the operation. With the help of my winemaker, Russ Rosner, we looked at every aspect of the business and began to make changes. And I'm going to highlight a few of these. If you're interested in more about my and Sokol Blosser's journey, I talk at length about sustainability in my book, The Vineyard Years, which I happen to have here for sale. Here are a few things we addressed. In the vineyard, first, I stopped grumbling about how much paperwork went into applying for organic certification, put my head down, and finished the 3-inch application. While we had been close to farming organically, this actually was a big change, and we knew that in order to make it work, we had to take the offensive to keep our vines immune from disease and insects, as we no longer had the nuclear options. I believe this made us better farmers, more careful, more vigilant. It changed, for example, how we looked at cover crops, too. The cover crops experiments of the 1980s had been testing individual grasses. Now we realized we needed a mix of grasses and legumes in order to better build the soil. There were a few mistakes. I thought it would be genius to put sheets of straw bales between the vines to keep weeds down and water in, until we realized at the end of the season that we had just provided the perfect home for the mice who were able to live unseen under the straw. What made us realize this was finding the vines girdled and dying in the 2 blocks where we had put the straw. I had hoped straw would be the answer to under-the-vine weed growth, and was thankful that at least I had experimented first in just 2 areas. We lost a lot of vines in that experiment. Then, when Russ, our winemaker, needed a way to get into the far reaches of our expanding vineyard to take grape samples before harvest, we got him a mountain bike instead of a 4-wheel ATV. In the winery, at a time when many wineries were turning to plastic corks and screw caps, we made a commitment to cork as one of the few renewable resources available to us. Cork wine stoppers are made from the bark of cork trees, which is stripped periodically from the trees, which themselves live for about 200 years. The cork forests are primarily in Portugal and the Mediterranean area and have been listed by the Nature Conservancy as one of the disappearing ecospheres important to the biodiversity of the planet. Cork forests provide habitat for endangered species and act as a buffer against desertification. They are also a source of economic security for the region whose economy is built around them. That's more than enough reasons to stick with wine's traditional closure. We worked hard at getting our wine labels on a high percentage of post-consumer waste recycled paper and also on recyclable backing. This was not easy. Label paper needs to have good wet strength because bottles are often put on ice. The label company we worked with told us nobody had asked the sustainability questions we were asking, but they were willing to work with us. We had them try a paper made from fast-growing, renewable bamboo-like plants called kanaf instead of trees, but that didn't work. It didn't have sufficient wet strength, was very expensive, and was hard to get. One time, our label rep came to us and said, "Okay, I can get you recycled paper on virgin backing or virgin paper on recycled backing. You choose." It took years to get what we wanted. When we decided to build a new barrel cellar, I looked into the U.S. Green Building Council's new LEED program and met with the director, Christine Irvin, to see if we could qualify, since at the time, LEED was not geared to industrial facilities. For example, we couldn't get any points for having a sustainable carpet because no part of the building was carpeted. But we managed to get enough points to get certified at the silver level and help the council see that they had to have a program for industrial as well as office buildings. Waste has probably been the biggest ongoing challenge. We could recycle glass, paper, and corks, but what about the mounds of shrink wrap generated from pallets of empty glass that come in for bottling. Then we discovered Agriplaz, a Salem company that recycled used plastic. We spread the word so other wineries could recycle theirs too. We never found a way to recycle the black plastic used in vineyard for new plantings, but it was satisfying to at least have a home for our mountains of shrink wrap. Sadly, that has disappeared, as China no longer buys the used plastic. In the tasting room, we made a push to carry only organic products. There wasn't much selection of organic t-shirts at the time, but we tried. We partnered with Dagoba Chocolate back when they were an Oregon company, now owned by Hershey. They made us a proprietary organic chocolate bar, which we called the Noir Bar, and we marketed it together with our Pinot Noir. We printed our brochures on 100% post-consumer content, processed chlorine-free paper using soy-based inks. I knew I could talk about sustainability until I was blue in the face, but it wouldn't mean anything unless everyone at the winery understood the concept and how they could help. We started staff training, mentored by those before us, like John and Jane Emmerich at Norm Thompson, who regularly did staff training. They actually had hired a director of sustainability, pretty rare at the time. I visited Fetzer Vineyard, where Paul Dolan had instituted sustainable practices throughout the business. And to me, that was the key and what has made Sokol Blosser unusual. Many businesses embrace sustainable practices in one area and ignore the rest, like a winery putting up solar panels but using synthetic chemicals in the vineyard, or religiously recycling but driving a gas-guzzling SUV. Trying to be sustainable in every aspect of one's life, personal and business, has been a huge challenge. It's become easier as sustainability has now become mainstream, but I remember when we had to hunt to find non-VOC paint and formaldehyde-free plywood when we remodeled our tasting room. I started in 2004 writing an annual sustainability report available on the winery website as a tool for staff, guests, and industry partners to view our achievements, challenges, and setbacks for the year, and there were always some of each. Sokol Blosser became the poster child for sustainability. We were honored by the City of Portland, the State of Oregon, Sunset Magazine, and Oregon Business Magazine. I joined the Natural Step Board and worked to inspire other companies to go for a sustainability. My children now run Sokol Blosser. I am one of the lucky ones whose children showed deep, heartfelt commitment to the vineyard and winery and were competent enough to take it on. They have continued our journey towards sustainability. We're not there. We continue to face challenges. There is no finish line. But it's the mindset that's important. Sustainability is a lens through which to look at the world. And the definition of sustainability I like best is Aldo Leopold's, which he formulated in the 1940s. He didn't use the word sustainability, but the concept is there. His definition is very simple. Planetary health is the capacity for self-renewal. Planetary health is the capacity for self-renewal. I like this because it has three implications to me. One, the definition is comprehensive. It applies to great and small, to large natural systems like the oceans, and to individual fish, plants, and people. Secondly, this definition implies the interconnection of all things. And three, this lens is perpetual, never-ending. Continual self-renewal is the only way to guarantee nature's gifts for future generations. I'm not an economist or an engineer. I'm a farmer and a business person who cares about the land and my community. Running Sokol Blosser proved to me that it is possible to work with nature, think globally, act locally, collaborate with other values-based companies, and be successful while mindful of the triple bottom line of people, planet, profit. About 10 years ago, Professor John Feldsteiner was interviewed on National Public Radio about his then new book. He's a Stanford English professor. His book was, "Can Poetry Save the Earth?" It's a collection of English and American poetry about the natural world. He was asked to pick one poem that if everyone read it, would save the world. The question, I'm sure, was in jest, but he didn't hesitate. He picked a poem by Oregon's own former poet laureate, William Stafford, whose son, Kim Stafford, has followed his father's footsteps to be our current poet laureate. I'm going to read you the poem. It's called The Well Rising. The well rising without sound, the spring on a hillside, the plowshare brimming through deep ground everywhere in the field, the sharp swallows in their swerve, flaring and hesitating, hunting for the final curve, coming closer and closer, the swallow heart from wing beat to wing beat, consoling decision, decision, thunderous examples. I place my feet with care in such a world. Thank you for your attention.